Hello guys, welcome back to LR Anime. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of BTTH Rebirth of Emperor Yang episode number 227 based on novel. So let's start. A foot fell, and a warcraft rushed in front of Xiao Yang suddenly died. However, immediately after that, countless warcraft were still rushing madly, and the roar echoed endlessly. The valley below was shaking. I don't know whether it was caused by a large number of actions of warcraft or the shock of roar. At this moment, Xiao Yang stood proudly at the top of the valley. He was surrounded by warcraft around the front, back, left and right. He launched a fierce attack on Xiao Yang from all directions. His fangs and claws, fighting spirit and energy kept flying. All of them shot at Xiao Yang and took their lives. In the face of this situation, Xiao Yang's face remained unchanged. One hand held the giant ruler. While the giant ruler swept across, the other hand swept on the edge of the ruler. The Mori white flame suddenly rose and swept across from the front with a fierce breath. Almost instantly, all the warcraft that Xiao Yang was attacking in front of were repulsed by it. Almost at the same time, at the moment when the giant ruler swept over, the palm holding the ruler handle suddenly loosened, and Xiao Yang's body suddenly turned back. In an extremely strange posture, at the moment when the giant ruler was about to fall, the other hand suddenly held the ruler handle, and the surging fighting spirit was immediately injected into the giant ruler, followed by another attack on the warcraft in front of and behind him. They were swept away in the blink of an eye. However, Xiao Yang smoothed the wave, and then several warcraft rushed from all directions. Xiao Yang flew several with 1 foot. Immediately, he stepped on the head of a warcraft, turned around and kicked him out. In just a few hours, Xiao Yang flew more than 100 warcraft, and killed dozens of them, but the warcraft around him seemed endless. However, such a situation did not seem to wear away Xiao Yang's patience, but strengthened the fanatical war spirit in the latter's heart. With the huge ruler in his hand, facing so many warcraft, he fought heartily in the most violent way, so that his own strength can be fully displayed. In a way, such a violent way of fighting also has some benefits for Xiao Yang himself. Suddenly, Xiao Yang at the top of the valley was colliding fiercely, but at the bottom of the valley, at the entrance, a warcraft tried to step over the body of the previous warcraft and enter the valley. Immediately, Xiao Yang's face changed slightly. He stepped on a warcraft and kicked it away. At the same time, his body was also swept into the air, and the giant ruler in his hand was waved hard. When the giant ruler lost his hand, even if he fell rapidly at a lightning speed, at the moment when the warcraft was about to enter the valley, he stubbornly killed his body at the entrance of the valley. While killing it, he also blocked the only entrance into the valley. Then, around Xiao Yang, countless warcraft came more crazy. Xiao Yang without weapons made these big guys less afraid of him. One by one, they showed sharp fangs and tore at Xiao Yang's body. However, they underestimated the human in front of them. Power elephant, gold elephant, Kai. Then, at the moment when Xiao Yang came down, his heart also gave a low drink. Almost at the same time, the strong physical strength hidden in Xiao Yang's body was completely released at this moment. The golden gang mask condensed on Xiao Yang's body surface. Let those warcraft rush, he just waved his fists and hit the oncoming warcraft head-on. For a long time, the pain roared more fiercely than before, and then came out of the warcraft pile. Compared with just now, Xiao Yang at the moment seems to break everything with a pair of fists. Under Xiao Yang's fist, any attack is quickly dumped in a decadent attitude. In the valley, the Blood Crown opened his mouth and looked up at Xiao Yang at the top. The shocked color in his eyes had disappeared with the slow passage of time. Only one face was stiff and twisted like a cramp. Soon, 1 day had passed, and there were only less than 2 days left from the 7 days mentioned by Xiao Xian. In the small valley, Hai Linger's breakthrough process is not over, which indicates that Xiao Yang and Xuemian must wait here. At this moment, Xiao Yang at the top of the deep valley couldn't help worrying. If the time dragged on too long, it wouldn't do them any good. With less than 2 days left, he wasn't sure whether he could take them away from the virtual environment at the bottom of the sea. He could only say that if Hai Linger's breakthrough couldn't end, he could only take them away by force. You must not stay here. Finally, at noon, Hai Linger, who had been in a breakthrough state in the valley, finally calmed down the surging energy of heaven and earth around her, and her breath was also stable in the early days of the 9-star fight. A pair of beautiful eyes closed for more than 10 days slowly opened, and a pair of ice-blue crystal eyes were immediately exposed to the air. The girl slowly got up and gently floated in her long skirt, revealing her next pair of slender legs as white as jade, concave convex and soft figure, which also showed incisively and vividly at the moment. Linger, you broke through. At the same time when the girl got up, Xiao Yan woke up from his absence, hurried to the girl's body, carefully helped the latter down the green stone platform with one hand, and asked with concern. Hearing the speech, the girl nodded with a blushing face and immediately said, "Brother Xiao Yan, thank you for protecting the Dharma these days. Otherwise, I don't know whether I can break through at ease." Hearing this, Xiao Yan first scratched his head with a smile, and then said a little embarrassed, "In fact, not all of them. I can easily deal with those warcraft the other day, but since the day before yesterday, there have been more and more warcraft gathered here, and I can't resist it." In the end, Xiao Yan could not help feeling a sense of self-reproach and lowered her head. Seeing this, Hai Linga could not help frowning slightly. Since Xiao Yan said that she had been unable to resist those warcraft since the day before yesterday, what happened in the next day or two? It was that man, the human named Xiao Yang, who suddenly appeared the day before yesterday. By himself, he blocked all the warcraft outside. Suddenly, the Blood Crown looked up and stretched out his hand to the highest part of the valley. Through the hole there, they could clearly see a figure with golden light all over. They were constantly waving their fists and blowing out the warcraft around them one by one. Feeling their gaze in the valley below, Xiao Yang also knew that Hai Linga had broken through. Now, it was finally time to leave. Lower down, Xiao Yang falls beside them, looks at Hai Linga who has withdrawn from cultivation, breathes a sigh of relief, nods and says, "You broke through, and now it's time for us to get out of here." Roar. When Xiao Yang came down, the warcraft from the outside rushed in through the entrance above the valley and surrounded the three people. Suddenly, Hai Linga and the blood-crowned spirit around her immediately tightened up, facing the warcraft around her, and her face immediately became dignified. "Mr. Xiao Yang, it seems that we have to go through a fierce battle before we leave," Xiao Yan said in a low voice. Her heart moved, and the fighting spirit in her body immediately flowed quickly. The same was true for Hai Linga on the side. On the contrary, Xiao Yang frowned, shook her head and sighed in a low voice. "No, we don't have so much time to waste. We must leave now." As soon as the voice fell, without waiting for the Blood Crown and Hai Linga to ask questions, Xiao Yang stretched out his hand, and the Xian heavy ruler outside the valley immediately flew and shot. Through the siege of warcraft, he quickly returned to Xiao Yang's hand, and then was turned by his backhand and included in the ring. Then, in the surprised eyes of the two people behind him, Xiao Yang raised his right hand and saw that a strange lacquer black energy light spot had been condensed in the palm of his right hand. "It's over." As the words spit out, the palm falls down, and then presses heavily on the void. Heaven-created palm. In the twinkling of an eye, another half a day has passed. Now, there is only the last day left from the 7-day period mentioned by Xiao Xian. Xiao Yang and his party must reach the exit of the underwater virtual environment within 1 day and successfully leave here, otherwise, the end is hard to estimate. For half a day, the three people didn't go too far away. After Xiao Yang informed the two blood crows of the situation of the sea baleen whale, the expression on the two faces also changed suddenly. Unexpectedly, the situation of the sea virtual environment has been extended to this point. Speaking of this, they have to blame the sea family. Infinite greed finally paid them a price. According to Bloodcrown's estimation, from now on, the three of them are at least a whole day away from the exit of the seabed virtual environment. Even if they can reach the exit of the seabed virtual environment in 1 day, they are doomed to be unable to leave the seabed virtual environment. Now, the time left for these three people is running out. With the Blood Crown, Xiao Yang cut through thorns and thorns all the way. The warcraft that came to obstruct were also solved by Xiao Yang in the most violent way. However, despite this, the speed of the three people was dragged down invisibly. "Damn it! We can't go on like this. We have to be faster." One punch forcibly killed a Warcraft in the front. Xiao Yan couldn't help scolding. He turned and looked at the countless Warcraft coming from the distance again. Xiao Yan couldn't help showing a dignified color on his face. Even if he is no longer a hero, he can never keep fighting all the time. What's more, there is less than a day before the deadline instructed by Xiao Xian. If he delays time because of the siege of these Warcraft, I'm afraid the three of them will really have no chance to leave here. Mr. Xiao Yang, what should we do? Xuemian knows that at this time, only relying on Xiao Yang can they have a glimmer of vitality. Therefore, all their actions must focus on Xiao Yang. When the blood crown opened, Hai Linga also turned her eyes to Xiao Yang. After seeing the amazing strength shown by Xiao Yang, she was convinced by the latter's strength. Moreover, there was the blood crown at the moment. Since even the blood crown had to ask Xiao Yang for advice, she would not say much more. After a little hesitation, Xiao Yang's heart moved. The space in front of him suddenly twisted. In the twinkling of an eye, it turned into two dark tents. With a wave of his hand, the two tents turned into two black robes and were handed over to them by Xiao Yang. After they put on their black robes, Xiao Yang then took out two pills from Naji and handed them to them. These two are popular pills, which can temporarily increase your speed, while your black robe can cover your breath and ensure that you will not be found by those Warcraft. Later, when those Warcraft rush over, I will temporarily drag them. You two will find the right time to leave here quickly and rush to the exit of the underwater virtual world as soon as possible. We left. What do you do? Hearing Xiao Yang's words, Xuemian frowned. He didn't dare to say that he was a person who was not afraid of life and death, but he couldn't ignore the people who helped him and let him leave like this. Xuemian was really sorry. Don't worry, after you leave here, I will naturally follow up immediately, but you should also ensure that you try to restrain your breath along the way and never conflict with those Warcraft beasts again, otherwise it will be too late. He nodded with a stern look on his face. Before the blood crown spoke again, Xiao Yang suddenly moved his body, and the black dark heavy ruler immediately fell into his hand. The giant ruler waved and blasted the Warcraft students around the three people out. The violent roar sounded one after another, and the faces of Blood Crown and Hai Linga fell low. They hesitated for a long time. After all, they bit their teeth with hatred. Taking advantage of an opportunity, they quickly left the battlefield. Aware of the two people's departure, Xiao Yang, who was in the pile of Warcraft, turned cold on his face. His extremely cold eyes quickly swept over the Warcraft around him. The giant ruler in his hand trembled slightly. In a short time, the forest white flame rose with it. The powerful power gathered madly in the giant ruler. The terrible energy breath spread from Xiao Yang's body, and the Warcraft around him roared. 7. Heavy. Broken. Days. Feet. Spit out words word by word. Then, Xiao Yang suddenly raised his head, raised the mysterious heavy ruler in his hand, held the ruler handle tightly with both hands, and swept the huge ruler in his hand. The terrible flame waves immediately swept out, spanning thousands of miles and sweeping between heaven and earth. 1 foot. 2 feet. 7 feet in a row, the Warcraft within 1,000 miles around Xiao Yang turned into a pile of corpses in the blink of an eye. The ruthless flame burned between the heaven and earth, the mountains and forests below were a sea of fire, and the invisible void collapsed. At this moment, the only one who remained alive between the heaven and earth was Xiao Yang. At this time, although the latter was like a murderous god, he spared no room and did not return to life. After finishing these, Xiao Yang put away the Xian heavy ruler again. He just wanted to think about the direction of Blood Crown and their departure, but then his body shook slightly and almost fell from the void. After many fierce battles, as early as he didn't know it, the fighting spirit in his body had been exhausted. The 7 feet just now was his last means at the moment. At present, if he couldn't recover the fighting spirit as soon as possible, Xiao Yang was afraid that he couldn't show even Tianju a step, let alone catch up with Xuemian. Who? Damn it, it happened at this time. The lack of fighting spirit in Xiao Yang's body made Xiao Yang's face look a little hard. He quickly took a few pills. Before the power of the pills in his body had dissipated, his body shook and a faint layer of golden light condensed on Xiao Yang's body surface. Helpless, now there is no fighting spirit in his body. Xiao Yan can barely rely on, that is, the only physical strength he has left. Bang! The soles of his feet stepped heavily on the void. Suddenly, while the void under his feet was twisting, Xiao Yang's body suddenly swept forward. With his strong physical strength, at this moment, the speed shown by Xiao Yang can be called good. However, if only this, I'm afraid Xiao Yang can't catch up with the two people in a short time. While feeling a little helpless in his heart, Xiao Yang had to make more efforts to rush forward with the help of physical strength. At the same time, the power of the two pills swallowed into his body was also being absorbed rapidly. Outside the virtual environment at the bottom of the sea, Naval Battle Sky and BTTH Jiao are waiting anxiously. Naval Battle Sky stands in place, frowning, his hands under his sleeve robe are constantly opening and clenching, his eyes are staring at the entrance of the virtual environment at the bottom of the sea, and his heart is full of worry. Behind him, BTTH Jiao also looked anxious. He kept walking back and forth. The sound of footsteps became heavier and heavier until it came to Hai Zhantian's ears. "You boy can't be quiet. I feel my heart is about to be crushed by you," he scolded in a low voice. Then he sighed, stopped and settled beside the sea battle day. In the rear, the people looked at the two people with anxious faces. They couldn't help looking at each other, and they were nervous. On the other side, Haimo Dust also came to the sea battle day, his eyes twinkled slightly, raised his hand and patted the latter on the shoulder, smiled and said, "Don't worry, I believe the boy, with him, your granddaughter and the other boy will be safe and sound." Hearing the speech, the sea battle sky frowned and sighed. The BTTH Jiao on the side quickly bowed to Haimo Dust. Haimo Dust gently waved his hand and just went away. However, in the field at this time, in addition to the worried faces of these people, there is another person whose mood is much more nervous than them. That is Xiao Xian, whose body is completely transparent and whose breath is extremely weak. Compared with others, Xiao Xian is more aware of the situation in the underwater virtual environment at the moment. After so many days of hard support, his soul power has already been overwhelmed. He has been forced to support all the time. The purpose is to wait for Xiao Yang to come back. But now, his soul power is far from enough to maintain the normal operation of the underwater virtual environment. I'm afraid it won't be long, the steady state of the seabed virtual environment will be completely broken, and at that time, Xiao Yang, who is in the seabed virtual environment, will be even more dangerous. At the same time, in the underwater virtual environment, Xuemian and Hai Linga accompanied each other. With Xiao Yang's black robe and the popular pill, they were a lot faster. They didn't dare to say twice the effort with half the effort, but they were not far from the exit of the underwater virtual environment. Along the way, they looked at the dilapidated mountains and land below. They couldn't help but show an unbearable look in their eyes. Unexpectedly, it was their fault that the intervention of their sea people would make the world look like this. On the other hand, Xiao Yang's fighting spirit is still gradually restored under the action of pills, and at the same time, Xiao Yang also continues to use his physical strength. The soles of his feet stepped heavily on the void. The powerful explosive force suddenly twisted the invisible void. When the twisted void under his feet collapsed because he could not bear the terrible force, Xiao Yang's body also shot a distance forward. However, the result of such an outbreak is unsatisfactory. No matter how much Xiao Yang squeezes his physical strength, the distance he flies forward is almost the same every time. The distance he flies out is far from making up for the power consumed during the outbreak. The result of this cycle will only slow down Xiao Yang's speed. In addition to these, the rest of the trouble, naturally, is the warcraft wandering between the mountains and forests. As soon as they saw Xiao Yang flying across the sky, they suddenly rushed crazy towards the latter, with a violent feeling of swallowing it alive. In the face of these countless troublesome guys, Xiao Yang has no other means except to kill them by force. However, on the other hand, this exacerbates the consumption of Xiao Yang's physical strength. If it goes on like this for a long time, I'm afraid Xiao Yang will fall here before he reaches the exit of the underwater virtual environment. Boom! Suddenly, the whole underwater void shook violently, and countless mountains were toppled. The river bucked, the mountains overturned, and the mountains and forests were destroyed. The roar of pain and fear echoed constantly in the world. The invisible void seemed to be squeezed by some force, and Xiao Yang immediately felt an invisible force coming on his shoulder. It makes his body standing in the void drop a little. The heart thought a little, the body just recovered a little fighting spirit, and immediately entered the meridians. The body shook slightly, which stabilized the body shape that wanted to continue to decline. At the same time, Xiao Yang's face became dignified in an instant. Looking up, over the distant sky, the invisible sky has collapsed, and the whole world has been gradually submerged in darkness. The endless void is like the overturning of sea water, vowing to drown the whole underwater void. Damn it, has the underwater virtual environment begun to collapse? As soon as his face sank, Xiao Yang couldn't help scolding. The virtual environment at the bottom of the sea began to collapse in advance, which has explained that the so-called time left for his last day, I'm afraid it will shrink greatly. If he can't leave here as soon as possible, even Xiao Yang will be submerged in this endless void. Almost at the same time, Xiao Xian outside the virtual environment at the bottom of the sea, because of the depletion of his soul power, his completely transparent body slowly faded down. Finally, the whole person turned into a milky white light mass the size of a fist, and his original thick breath became silent. Not far away, when Haimo Dust saw this scene, his face changed slightly and his body twinkled. He came to the side of the light group, stretched out one hand and wrapped it with an invisible force to avoid being disturbed by the energy of the outside world. Naval Battle Day quickly came forward and saw that Xiao Xian turned into such a state. On an old face full of flesh, his expression became more and more anxious. He unknowingly had cold sweat flowing down his temples. A pair of deep eyes stared at the entrance of the virtual environment at the bottom of the sea and dared not move away for a moment. Without the support of his soul power, I'm afraid the space in the underwater virtual environment has begun to collapse at the moment. That is to say, Xiao Xian told Xiao Yang that day. This last day, I'm afraid it's even more nervous than expected. Now I can only expect that Xiao Yang had found them long ago and was already in the channel of the entrance and exit. At this moment, even Haimo Dust couldn't help but be a little surprised. Even he was quite surprised by the scene at this moment, but he didn't know what situation Xiao Yang would face at this time. In the underwater virtual environment, the whole world has begun to collapse, and countless warcraft are running around. Xiao Yang and his 3 people are also running towards the exit of the underwater virtual environment. With the help of the convenience given by Xiao Yang, Xuemian and Hai Linga finally came to the exit of the virtual environment at the bottom of the sea early. When they came here, they couldn't help but look happy on their faces and have a sense of happiness for the rest of their lives in their hearts. However, when they came here, they were not in a hurry to enter the exit. Instead, they stopped and turned to look at the direction when they came, hoping to see the trace of Xiao Yang. Unfortunately, the figure of the latter did not appear in their vision for a long time. Seeing that the world around them had begun to collapse inch by inch, both young people couldn't help feeling a sense of fear. At the same time, they were more worried about Xiao Yang. The latter stopped the countless warcraft with his own strength, but they were the first to escape regardless of the latter, which really made them feel guilty. At the moment, they couldn't see Xiao Yang's body again, and they even didn't want to leave here. In the virtual environment at the bottom of the sea, the Blood Crown held the girl's slender jade hand tightly, frowned at the coming direction, and waited anxiously in his heart. Boom! The roar of heaven and earth kept ringing, the invisible void was violently distorted, and then collapsed. Suddenly, there were black thunder, which suddenly shot out of the endless void. With the terrible momentum of destroying the sky and the earth, it instantly destroyed the large mountains and forests below. Countless warcraft died instantly under the bombardment of the thunder, and the surrounding dumped mountains and forests have turned into a sea of fire. The whole underwater virtual environment has become like a purgatory at the moment. Seeing this scene, the Blood Crown and Hai Linga hiding behind him were surprised. The girl behind him couldn't help shouting. The Blood Crown was sweating on his forehead and trembling in his heart. The strength of the thunder was unimaginable. Once the thunder targeted them, they might not even have a chance to escape. Brother Xuemian. Mr. Xiao Yang, why hasn't he come out yet? In her heart, The girl grabbed the corner of the blood crown dressed in black robe and said with fear, "Don't worry, it's all right. Mr. Xiao Yang's strength is the most powerful among all the strong fighters I've ever seen. If we wait, he will come out." Blood Crown bit his teeth and looked at the partially collapsed earth below. His heart couldn't help sinking. If Xiao Yang didn't come out again, no matter what, they must enter the exit of the virtual environment at the bottom of the sea. In a quarter of an hour, if Mr. Xiao Yang hasn't come out yet, then we can only leave here first. Patted the girl on the shoulder, and the Blood Crown comforted her. The latter heard the speech and nodded obediently, pressed the fear in his heart and waited patiently. At the same time, in the depths of the virtual environment under the sea, Xiao Yangjing squeezed his tired body with the help of fighting spirit, forcibly pulled out the strength of his muscles and shot forward again and again. Sweat kept pouring out. While wetting Xiao Yang's clothes, more fell into the endless abyss below. The infinite earth is already collapsing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Even in front of Xiao Yang, where he enters the eye, the earth is collapsing. In the dark endless void, thunders continue to fall, killing the warcraft running around mercilessly. It looks like cleaning up the world polluted by the outside world. Rule change: this virtual environment of the seabed is no longer necessary. It is only a matter of time for it to collapse and disappear completely. Looking at what happened in front of him, Xiao Yang couldn't help but tighten his heart, bit his teeth, gathered his strength again, moved his body vigorously, and wanted to rush forward. But at this time, in the endless void, a terrible thunder suddenly fell on Xiao Yang's head. Damn it! As soon as his face changed, Xiao Yanfen tried his best to mobilize the fighting spirit that had just recovered in his body. At the same time, the little strength that had just gathered all over his body also broke out at this moment. His body tilted and quickly dodged to one side. Boom! The thunder came into the world and fell hard on Xiao Yang's body. The terrible destructive power spread from it. You can even see clearly that even the collapsed endless void was violently distorted. Finally, Xiao Yang passed by the edge of the thunder in an extremely lucky way, and the unparalleled thunder was submerged in the endless void. However, the terrible thunder power contained in the thunder still ran into Xiao Yang's body, rapidly in his limbs and bones, and suddenly, a burst of crisp and numb feeling immediately spread into Xiao Yang's mind, and the whole person's body also fell down uncontrollably. Boom! When he missed, the thunder seemed unwilling to attack again, but this time, Xiao Yang's body was completely out of control. He could only watch the thunder smash down on his body. Damn it! Move! Move! The tired body was out of control. Xiao Yang screamed wildly in his mind. The terrible thunder fell quickly. In the twinkling of an eye, it was only a foot away from the latter's body. At this distance, in the face of such terrible thunder, even an ordinary 9-star fighting emperor is afraid to be difficult to avoid, not to mention Xiao Yang, who is exhausted at the moment. Then the next moment, the thunder full of destructive power came to Xiao Yang's eyes. It was only an inch away from the latter's body. In a moment, Xiao Yang's hair stood up. The power of thunder had flowed into Xiao Yang's body through the invisible void and rushed into his muscles and bones. The tingling feeling came immediately. Boom! The thunder came into the world, fiercely passed through the void and disappeared into the endless void again. Xiao Yang's body was magical and escaped this fatal blow again. Above the void, Xiao Yang looked bitterly at the terrible thunder that didn't enter the endless void. He couldn't help feeling a sense of happiness. He didn't expect that he could be blessed in such a situation. He grinned, but he didn't know whether it was the pain in his body or the joy in his heart. Then his eyes turned and fell on himself. Looking at his shoulder, a wisp of small thunder rushed out from under his muscles, and then disappeared. However, what really made Xiao Yang happy was the pale blue virtual image of Wei Ran behind him at the moment. With the help of the stimulation of those thunder forces, Xiao Yang stimulated the last potential strength in his body. Unexpectedly, with all his strength, Xiao Yang accidentally condensed the blue virtual image behind him at the moment, which is the third decision of the four saints, the wing image decision. It was also the cohesion of the wing elephant decision that Xiao Yang just avoided the thunder. Who? Feeling the weak power in his body, Xiao Yang couldn't help but breathe a long breath, raised his eyes, looked at the thunder that gathered strength again and fell suddenly at the height of the void, suddenly clenched his hands, and his body trembled. With the help of the wing image, his body shape disappeared instantly, and the thunder that followed also flew into the air again. As for Xiao Yang, he didn't stop at all. He left this area far away before his strength dissipated again. At the same time, the Blood Crown and Hai Linga at the exit of the underwater virtual environment also sighed heavily, confirming that Xiao Yang hadn't come out yet. Then they slowly turned around and raised their feet into the channel after a little hesitation. Outside the underwater virtual environment, Naval Battle Day and Bitian Jiao stood together in front of the entrance of the underwater virtual environment, waiting anxiously. Bean-sized sweat kept dripping down, and their hearts almost mentioned their throat. Bit by bit in the past, everyone present knew that it was difficult to preserve the virtual environment at the bottom of the sea. I'm afraid it was close to the complete collapse of the virtual environment at the bottom of the sea, but the two of the family and Xiao Yang, who went to save people, didn't come out, which made everyone present sweat secretly for the three people. Haimo Dust stared at the entrance of the virtual environment at the bottom of the sea. Although his face was still calm, his heart was also extremely nervous. Even if he had infinite confidence in Xiao Yang, he didn't dare to confirm whether the latter could really come out at this time. Buzzing, buzzing. Suddenly, there was a sudden trembling and flashing light at the entrance of the originally calm underwater virtual environment. Then, two figures in black robes flashed out together. For a moment, the eyes of the two people, who had been staring at the entrance, immediately fell on the two people. With their strong accomplishments, they recognized their identities in an instant. Linga, Blood Crown. The two people spoke in unison, and there was no need to say more about the ecstasy in their voices. For a moment, the huge stone hanging in their hearts finally landed. They set off together, rushed forward, and held one person tightly in their arms. At the same time, the two parents also clearly saw the palms of the man and woman holding each other tightly. Having no time to take care of them, the two men were only concerned about their ecstatic mood. Their eyes were filled with tears and almost rolled down. The two young men were also surprised by the actions of the two elders. Soon, when they recovered, the girl saw it. Only then did she breathe a sigh of relief and come to the blue-haired middle-aged man behind the Sea Battle Day, her father. As a father, the latter's feelings for his daughter are naturally no less than her grandfather. However, as the head of a family, he has to focus on the ethnic group. Before the people, he always has to maintain dignity. Until now, when he sees that his daughter is okay, the father can't help but red his eyes. It was not until a long time later that Hai's Hanshan and Bitianjiao released the child in their arms, but they still looked at the youth and girls with a smile. At this time, Haimo Dust on one side stepped forward, looked at Xuemian and asked, "What about Xiao Yang? Shouldn't he be with you?" Noticing the black robes they were wearing, Haimo Chen immediately knew that Xiao Yang had walked with them, but at the moment, Xuemian and Hai Linga successfully escaped from the virtual environment at the bottom of the sea, but Xiao Yang disappeared, which could not help but aggravate the worry in Haimo Chen's heart. As soon as these words came out, the people present immediately recovered. Indeed, they were happy with the return of Blood Crown and Hai Linga, but they seemed to forget that Xiao Yang, who entered the underwater virtual environment and went to rescue them, didn't know anything about the latter at the moment. The only thing they knew was that Xiao Yang was still in the underwater virtual environment, and the situation must not be good. Hearing Haimo Chen's words, the faces of Xuemian and Heilinger, who just showed their joy because they escaped from the dilemma, immediately darkened again. A man and a woman were all buried with their heads, and their faces looked particularly solemn. Then, Xuemian found them in the virtual environment at the bottom of the sea, including Xiao Yang, to resist Warcraft for them, explained everything in detail. Hearing the words of Blood Crown, the faces of several people present changed slightly. They were moved by what Xiao Yang had done. At the same time, they were worried about the latter's situation at the moment. That boy. He won't have a problem. Hai Zhantian hesitated to turn his eyes to Haimo Dust. While spitting out his words, his face also showed a trace of guilt. After all, Xiao Yang was still because of him. Otherwise, Xiao Yang would not encounter this danger. Alas. Even I'm not sure now. I just hope he can save the day. He has come so far. This time, I don't want him to fall down like this. With a long sigh, even Haimo Dust inexplicably felt a little helpless. The sea battle sky was speechless. The big stone that had just fallen in the heart a moment ago was now hanging high in the invisible. At the same time, the atmosphere on the field inexplicably became dignified again, even heavier than before. Blood Crown came to the girl's side, and they looked at each other with a worried look in their eyes. The girl frowned slightly, and her slender jade hand grabbed a corner of the black robe. They stared at the entrance of the virtual environment at the bottom of the sea and waited attentively. Boom! Suddenly, the entrance of the underwater virtual environment suddenly trembled, the huge roar continued to spread on the seabed, and the huge suction poured out from the entrance. Fortunately, the sea water of this generation was forcibly emptied by the naval battle day, making the place where everyone was located a huge open space. Therefore, there was no sea water pouring into the underwater virtual environment. However, the sudden changes in the virtual environment at the bottom of the sea suddenly changed the faces of the people present, especially Haimo Dust and Naval Battle Day. The palms of both hands hidden under their sleeves and robes immediately clenched, and cold sweat immediately came out of their forehead, even their hearts trembled. Xiao Yang, you must come out. Haimo Chen's eyes narrowed and stared at the entrance of the virtual environment at the bottom of the sea. He pressed down his mood and waited anxiously. At the same time, after a difficult competition in the seabed virtual environment, Xiao Yang finally entered the exit of the seabed virtual environment, but almost at the same time, the whole seabed virtual environment has completely collapsed. The exit of the seabed virtual environment is also collapsing at a very fast speed, and he is about to catch up with Xiao Yang in front of him. Once the passage completely collapses before Xiao Yang goes out, the latter will never have a chance to escape and fall into this endless void. The end will be unpredictable. Soon, at the end of the line of sight in front of Xiao Yang, you can see a blue light curtain, which is the exit from the virtual environment at the bottom of the sea. As long as you pass through there, what happens in the rear has nothing to do with Xiao Yang. However, at this time, the channel in front of Xiao Yang suddenly began to collapse. At the same time, it was still the light curtain at the end of the line of sight, and the light on it was also gradually dimmed. Then, such a large exit was shrinking rapidly at the speed visible to the naked eye. Once it disappeared completely, Xiao Yang would never be able to leave here again. Outside, a group of people in Haimo Dust saw the rapidly shrinking and disappearing entrance to the virtual environment at the bottom of the sea, and their emotions became more intense. Everyone was anxious like ants on a hot pot. While looking forward to it, they couldn't help showing a lonely look on their face. Until the entrance of the underwater virtual environment turned into a palm-sized aperture, and then at the moment of its complete disappearance, everyone present could not help lowering their heads, and the last expectation in their hearts was completely wiped out. However, almost at the same time, the black robe on Xuemian and the black robe held by Hai Linga were invisible and disappeared quietly. This video will end here.